Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, as reports emerge of Tory MPs complaining that the mortgage crisis is going to cost them the election, I'm going to discuss my updated thoughts on possible timing of the general election. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, mortgage catastrophe will lose us the election, warned Tory MPs. That's the headline. As if things were going according to plan beforehand. It seems they thought they were. But never mind that. A change in the way Tories are seeing their electoral chances inevitably brings up the possibility that they're changing their view on when would be the best time to go to the polls. Now, I want to look at this from a few different angles this week, other news allowing, but let me go through what I think are the important factors to consider if you're trying to work out what might be in the Tories' minds, when they might choose to put themselves out of their misery and ours and just call the election that jettisons their latest disastrous period of government into the history books. I did see a suggestion that the Tories might want to delay the election for as long as possible now. Now, in theory, that would mean January 2025, but I don't think they mean that. That would be lunacy. A winter election means concerns about the cost of energy, leading to people choosing between eating and heating again, even with energy costs going down, everything else is going up, wages aren't going up. Also means going to the polls in the middle of the NHS winter crisis. The only reason for delaying until January 2025 would be in the vain hope that some good news would come along. Anything. There's no good news possible in the winter of a country whose government has destroyed public services and living standards. Winter is the time of year when all of these wayward policies are brought into the sharpest focus. Besides, if they go to the polls in January, they give Starmer and Reeves, basically, because they'd come in January, a couple of months to sort out their budget, then they announce it in the March. A month later it comes online, bosh. If you go to the polls in summer or autumn, you leave Labour stuck with the latest Tory budget for much longer. They can announce an emergency budget, but it doesn't really change anything. Leaving it until the last possible moment means realistically autumn 2024. So let's go over the three realistic options here. So the first would be this autumn, very much on the cards. The government still insists that they are setting into motion full standards controls on EU imports. This is scheduled to begin at the end of October and be fully in place a year later. This will lead to more shortages of food and medicine and even higher Brexit premium in the inflation figures. The mortgage time bomb is also blowing up next year, something Tory MPs are only now worrying about for some reason. They didn't see it coming, even though everyone was talking about it for like a year and a half. So all things considered, if the Tories realise they're losing, no matter when they have the election, and decide to hold it at a time when it will leave the biggest pile of horseshit for Starmer to deal with in Downing Street, this autumn is the time to go. Strategically, if the Conservative Party wanted to act in its long-term interests, I think they would favour this autumn. Indeed, there are some who think that this is the most likely time for the general election, but I think there are a couple of other considerations. First of all, are we sure that Tory MPs are thinking strategically? If they were, why wouldn't they have just implemented more popular policies for the last year? That's what I keep coming back to. If Tories are being strategic in the timing of the election, why aren't they being strategic with their budgets and policies? So I don't think we can base our predictions on the idea that the Tories are being strategic. The reason this mortgage catastrophe is coming is because they encouraged the Bank of England to raise interest rates to deal with a supply-side inflation problem. It's had economists face-palming for months now. The Tories have deliberately created this catastrophe, which they now say is going to cost them the election. Where's the strategy? The second consideration is that if Sunak goes to the polls this autumn, if Tory MPs are sort of thinking next autumn, he's basically asking an awful lot of them to sacrifice their seats a year early. Because if they go to the polls this autumn, they're going into a losing situation. They are just trying to limit the damage. They know that a load of them are getting their P45s. Yes, Sunak can go ahead and do it whether they like it or not, but he's shown no signs of wanting to divide his party. This would be very divisive. Besides, if the Tories lose the by-elections next month, and there's an extra one coming up now, but if they do lose them, especially Selby and Ainsty, I think that will put the wind up them. See, there will be MPs who would If they're going to have to lose their job as an MP anyway, they'd rather stay for another year than be jobless this Christmas. You know, thoughts and prayers to Jonathan Gullis and all that. So I don't know. I can't bring myself to think that the Tories are being strategic in terms of election timing, while so clearly unstrategic on other matters. But, you know, let's say Isaac Levidow gives Sunak a tap on the shoulder and tells him to go this autumn unless you want to have literally no party left at all. Then absolutely it could happen. The second realistic window, because I've said winter is a non-starter in any year now, surely, would be next spring, either May or June, late spring. That would seem the most likely. Now, the reason why I tip this period as more likely than the others is because the news is expected to be less dire. Well, some news. Think about how the cost of living news is being presented now, as opposed to last autumn, or even the autumn before, if you want to ignore Truss's unique contribution to the economy. Right now, the cost of living news is all about inflation not falling quickly enough, or the increasing number of people who will be slapped with huge increases in mortgage repayments in the future. It's not about the here and now. Even though gilt yields are now higher than they were under Liz Truss, most of the news aren't really focusing on that. It's all about what's going to happen. So although people are struggling right now, there's very little focus on the here and now in the news. It's all about the problems that's going to happen later. But in the autumn, the economic news tends to be about the here and now. The cost of energy, because that's on people's minds. They're using more of it. The cost of food, because we're trying to import Christmas food without the haulage capacity to manage in even normal times. So the pressure that puts on things. The problems will be getting worse again in the autumn. There'll be a whole summer of channel crossings data for the gammons to furrow their brows over. But next summer will be a relative island of calm. Relative, mind you. The cost of living crisis won't have gone anywhere. For many people, have gotten much worse. Sunak's 5 pledges are likely in tatters unless he's somehow wangled the halving of inflation and some like 0.2% growth. Not that these will help him, because people will ask why, if Sunak kept his promises on the cost of living, their own cost of living crisis is still getting worse. They might just draw the conclusion that even when Sunak succeeds, it doesn't actually do them any good. This is why I put it as slightly more likely than any other time, purely because it will be the least shit time for Sunak to go to the polls, if we assume that Tory MPs don't fancy this autumn, that is. And especially if they lose the by-elections next month, as I say. I would need some convincing that Tory MPs will be up for an election this autumn. But like I said, it is possible. It's certainly possible. The third realistic window is autumn 2024. Now, if they are desperately clinging on to the hope of like some good news, like being able to ride the coattails of a Ukraine military victory, for example, then yes, you could see the Tories going for autumn 2024. But as I alluded to in explaining why I think summer is best for the Tories, the chances are that they would be making a bad decision. See, let's look at the reasons why autumn 2024 is not in the Tories' long-term interest. First, more energy being used, which means that the cost of living becomes a more talked about issue. Even with energy costs being lower, they're still unaffordable for so many. Second, the longer we go, the more difficult it will be for Brexiteers to make excuses for the Brexit premium in our inflation figures. Third, the standards controls, which the Tories insist they're going ahead with this time, if they do, will be causing havoc in our supply chains. Fourth, Labour will have had more time to improve their communications and present their policies. Fifth, the Tories will have had more time to scratch the crap out of each other with their catfights. Sixth, more time is being given for damaging revelations to emerge from the COVID inquiry. Seventh, the government are supporting moves by the Bank of England to trigger a recession next year. I don't know when it's likely to hit, and maybe neither do they, but I think it's a safe bet it will have turned up by next autumn. Eighth, there is going to be Armageddon for mortgage holders. The government may be forced to help them out in order to keep vote share in double figures, but it's not really their way, and it's not clear how they will pay for it without losing economic credibility elsewhere. Ninth, Boris Johnson's cult, assuming they have a game plan, will have had more time to cause problems at the local party level. They are aiming to trigger deselections of MPs they do not approve of. This only gets easier if you give them more time. 10th, it stores up more time for serious rebellions to occur. See, at the moment, Sunak has got policies which just about have his party on board. They'll sort of go along with his legislative agenda for now. But as they get ticked off, he needs others to work on. this runs the risk of having to pick ones which divide the party. If I put more thought into it, I could probably go on. Autumn 2024 just sounds like a truly terrible idea if Tory MPs want to give themselves a fighting chance of coming back for the following election. But like I say, the Tory benches do not strike me as being occupied by strategic geniuses, and they may care less about the party than how long they can hold on to their own seats. They may delude themselves into thinking that a possible Ukrainian victory can somehow counter all the various domestic problems which will have exploded in time for next autumn. So it's possible. I just think they would be insane to leave it that late. But then maybe they are insane. In terms of my instinctive thinking, I think it's close to a toss-up between this autumn and next spring or summer. I say that because I think this autumn makes the most sense, but I also think Tory MPs probably don't see it this way. I would rate autumn 2024 as lower probability because I think even they will understand how crazy that would be, but I can't be absolutely sure. But all this being said, I think the considerations are going to be quite volatile now. It's clear that the Tories recognise that their plan's not working. Sunak is now having a reset. This week's going to be reset week. What is a reset week? It's code for we've lost our focus, it's all gone tits up, we need to start again. That is not a sign that they plan an election anytime soon. It's a sign that everything's gone awry. The by-election losses, if they all become losses, that'll be another one. There'll probably be another reset in September. So if events keep throwing their plans out, they will have a choice. They can either keep going and keep pushing the date back and back and back until they run out of road altogether, or they can just conclude, do you know what, we're buggered and it's better to do it sooner rather than later, because we are now in the territory of it is actually better for the Tories to go to the polls sooner rather than later. Right now, they stand to lose a lot of seats. It is no exaggeration, the Tories MPs are quite right, it's no exaggeration to say that for every new wave of mortgage holders that comes off their fixed rates term and onto one that is hundreds of pounds a month extra in some cases, it is, and for an average of £3,000 a year, it is no exaggeration to say they're going to lose more and more and more voters. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.